Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel. Kryptonians Return from Infinite. Chapter 1. February 11, 2010, at 6:50 a.m. In a relatively high-end apartment in the Brooklyn neighborhood. Bright light came in from the gap in the curtains, drawing bright golden lines obliquely in the room, and fine dust swirled slowly in the air. When the young man opened his eyes, he saw such a scene. The soft and wide duvet covered his body, and he felt a slight dull feeling in his chest. When he looked down, a beautiful and charming sleeping face appeared in front of his eyes. The morning sun fell on the two of them, giving off a warm luster. The gold hair was scattered on the white pillow, the long eyelashes of the sleeping beauty trembled slightly, and the thin hair slowly undulated with her breathing. Thin sheets, everywhere as full of ambiguous atmosphere. The restless thoughts in his heart gradually rose, but in the end he was forced to hold back by the young man. Afterwards, it took a few more minutes before the boy finally got out of this alluring bed. The morning in February was still cold. Although it was nothing compared to the physical fitness of the two of them, he still put on a pair of trousers as a habit after leaving the quilt, and before leaving, he put on a pair of trousers for the beauty on the bed. Tucking in the quilt gently, she pushed open the door and walked towards the balcony. At this moment, the warm sunlight has burst out from the eastern sky, coating the world in front of him with a layer of gold. The young man looked down at the peaceful city under his feet, and his somewhat messy thoughts could not help but drift away. The boy's name is Ko Zoal, and he just turned 18 this year. Although he looks the same as the people on Earth from common in appearance, in fact, he and the sleeping blonde beauty in the bedroom are both from another planet beyond the starry sky. And this planet is the hometown of Superman in DC Comics, Krypton. As for Ko Zoal, yes, just as you think, besides his identity as a Kryptonian, his original soul was also replaced by an outsider from Otherworld as early as the beginning of his birth. Another, he, in memory came from a magical space called Lord God. This is a very large-scale time-traveling organization. In order to distinguish it from those wild time travelers, all members in this space call themselves reincarnations. The daily life of the reincarnation is to travel around through the dispatch of the main god to collect information from various worlds in the multi-universe so as to achieve the goal of evolution. Different from the evolution of species in the narrow concept of human beings, the evolution of the main god space includes almost any aspect that Ko knows or has never known: gene evolution, energy evolution, rule evolution, and even world evolution. However, the evolution of the main god space is almost entirely based on the premise of aggression against other worlds, and the energy needed for any evolution comes from the plundering of these worlds. It is also because of this that the main god sends the reincarnated people into each world and assigns them extremely dangerous tasks one by one. If they fail or cannot be completed, they will be directly wiped out from the root, so as to force them to go on in death and evolution. The former Ko was also a member of this gang of bad guys. In those unbearable days, he would sometimes appear in a closed company with a group of mercenaries, fighting monsters infected by the virus. The Sunere Lord of the Ponytail wins. Sometimes he witnesses how a reckless teenager breaks his destiny and achieves eternal supremacy. Sometimes, he even meets another group of guys with the same background as him. Definitely, if you really encounter this kind of situation, then basically it is either you kill me or I kill you, and it is best not to expect to get along with each other in harmony, because that means that there must be their concerted efforts in this world to escape. A catastrophic scenario unfolds on the day of birth. So I don't know how long years have passed, and finally one day, as the only survivor among the previous batches of reincarnations, Ko passed a full 100 plot tasks and obtained a lot of information and evolutionary direction for the main god space. Therefore, in order to reward excellent employees like him, and to promote a positive atmosphere in the space, the Lord God generously expressed that he would fulfill one of his wishes. There is no doubt that Ko chose to leave the main god space. The Lord God, who always keeps his word, readily agreed to the request, and then kicked Ko into the DC universe, making him reincarnate into a Kryptonian baby just born from the culture fluid. Perhaps it was a coincidence, or maybe it was because of the intervention of the main god that the male gene that prompted Ko's birth, the biological mother is unknown, came from Superman's biological father, Jor-El, the chief scientist of the Kryptonian Empire. It's just that the other party seems to have a grudge against KO for some special reasons, so he didn't choose to raise him himself after his birth, but handed him over to his younger brother Zoal, and never cared about him. And that's why KO is called KO Zoal, not KO Al. In this way, KO started his new life as a Kryptonian. It was not until the age of 10 that the core of Krypton collapsed completely that he and his titular sister Carla Zoal left the exploding planet in a spaceship, Planet. But at this moment, the butterfly's wings began to flap again. Anyone who knows something about the role of Carla Zoal, female Superman, should know that when Krypton was destroyed that year, although the spacecraft she was carrying was the same as Superman, it was flying in the direction of the Earth. However, during this process, a meteorite hit her spaceship, causing Carla to deviate from the established orbit and was forced to enter a long-term dormancy. By the time she arrives on Earth, Superman will be nearly 40 years old, while Carla's body and memory will remain as a teenager. The same is true for Carla here, but it seems that because of the intruder KO, the two of them were not attacked by meteorites. It was even more unlucky to fall directly into the turbulence of time and space, and travel to another strange but familiar world. Recalling the past in his heart, KO heard familiar footsteps. Looking back, a beautiful figure with long gold hair was slowly walking towards him. This is a young woman in her early 20s, wearing only a large gray sweater on her graceful body. She looks pure and coquettish. Why do you wake up so early? Even the whispering voice is cute. Just remembered something. KO stretched out his hand to hold the woman in his arms, and kissed her cheek intimately. And you also know that for us, sleep is just a way to relax the mind. In fact, there is no problem even if you don't sleep for a few years. It's strange. Hearing this sentence, Carla, who was still a little confused, suddenly woke up, and glared at him angrily. I was almost exhausted last night. If I didn't feel that there was something missing around me just now, I would have slept till the end of the day. Woke up in the afternoon. Thick black eyebrows raised lightly. Can I take this as a compliment? Definitely not. As Carla said, she cupped his face and kissed him deeply, and then said with a sweet smile, "Look, this is the compliment you deserve." Seeing the girl's unabashedly intimate behavior, even as an experienced driver, KO couldn't help feeling a feeling of happiness in his heart. Speaking of the current relationship between the two, it is really helpless and bloody, and if I have to use any words to describe it, there are only 8 words: parents' life, long-term love. In fact, due to the completely crooked reproduction system, there is no such thing as close relatives being unable to combine in the laws of Krypton, not to mention that the genetics of the two are actually far less close than imagined. Even the results of DNA tests are considered to be relatives beyond 5 generations at most. Because of this, KO, who was born 10 years earlier than the cheap brother, made a marriage contract with Carla before Krypton collapsed. And after the two came to the Earth, the siblings who already had a marriage contract depended on each other for nearly 7 years. If this fails to take down each other's body and mind, the former reincarnation simply put the S on the chest upside down, write it down. All in all, since the first time, led by KO 2 years ago, the relationship between the siblings has slowly become what it is now. And when the habit became natural, the only 2 Kryptonians in the world finally changed from childhood sweethearts to a closer relationship. Thinking of this, KO's blue's eyes dimmed, and then he suddenly stretched out his hands, and hugged Carla by the waist amidst Carla's exclamation. Glanced at the clock hanging on the wall of the living room, KO's mouth curved slightly. Well, at 7:13, it's time for morning exercise. I believe everyone who has read DC Comics here should understand how strong the Kryptonians are. So after an intense morning exercise, it's basically time for lunch. And in order to thank Sister Carla for her hard work as a training partner, after lunch, Carl spent another 5 hours and made a return. Don't get me wrong, this time I mean watching movies and shopping. After a short rest, the siblings left the apartment hand in hand and walked towards the busiest street in Brooklyn. 18-year-old KO is young and handsome. Although his facial features are slightly immature, his calm demeanor conceals this youthfulness. Even in casual clothes, he has attracted the attention of many women on the road. As for Carla, let alone, she is in her best years in her early 20s, and her appearance and figure are more beautiful than the female Superman in the previous TV drama version, and she is a beautiful scenery wherever she goes. What's more, today she deliberately changed into a skirt that she doesn't usually wear, and put on some light makeup. Although it's fine to be a natural beauty without makeup, it's a matter of attitude, and it doesn't matter in daily life. You must not be ambiguous when dating. Young men and women walked side by side and began to walk aimlessly on the road. When they went shopping, they each bought something for each other. During the period, they watched a movie with the theme of love, and the rest was purely kill time. So until the evening, the two wandered back and forth in the commercial street several times, and finally walked into a supermarket not far from home, and bought a batch of daily necessities and a large number of snacks and desserts. As we all know, Kryptonians can gain power comparable to or even surpassing that of gods by absorbing the energy, sunlight, of the yellow fixed star. So in theory, as long as there is sufficient sunlight, the siblings can live a healthy life even without eating and sleeping. But a theory is a theory after all, just like a capitalist who has a lot of money but still doesn't let go of any chance to make money. Carla, who can survive only on the energy of fixed star, also loves all kinds of delicacies and junk food, and eats a lot. Then Hinata of the American comics world. Fortunately, the siblings with super abilities are not short of money, otherwise, the common family would not be able to afford just food expenses. Sir, don't you want something else? For example, freshly ground coffee beans. If you buy $200 of coffee beans at a time, our store will give you a fresh grinder for free. Believe me, you will like it. No noise consumption with fewer beans, the ground coffee is mellow and full-bodied, and the concentration can also be adjusted. This is not the first time for the shopping guide to deal with this young pair of siblings. Whether it is Carl or Carla, every time they come here, they will purchase a huge amount of ingredients and supplies, and consume them in a very short period of time. The sales are also extremely generous. Let the shopping guide very impressed. But now Carl ignores the salesman's sales, because his attention is all attracted by the TV in the supermarket. Everyone in front of the TV, here is an urgent news. The news host held down the headset, threw the manuscript aside, pulled off his tie with excitement on his face, and said hastily, "Please don't change the channel, I guarantee that this news is worth the money." As soon as the voice fell, the picture on the TV screen was transferred from the live broadcast hall to the sky above New York City, and below it was Manhattan, the economic center of New York. If it was just a live broadcast of the bustling night scene of Manhattan, the audience in front of the TV would probably choose to switch channels, but Manhattan tonight is very different. Because it's so lively. Armed helicopters hovered in the sky, underground tanks rumbled past, keen viewers even saw temporary positions piled up with sandbags in the erratic camera, large numbers of land soldiers poured into the streets, and the police were dispatched to evacuate the crowd. What happened? New York is at war. Who is the enemy? The audience in front of the TV had a collective orgasm, and the flames of war ignited the destructive factors in their bodies. They howled and called for friends, turned away the beer and had a party at home. The people who are born to love death even expect that the battle will last all day and night, and they have never thought about the devastating impact on the U.S. economy if Manhattan is destroyed. Ko frowned slightly, and exchanged a glance with Carla next to him, and they both noticed the strangeness in each other's eyes. Under the influence of superhearing, countless screams echoed in their ears, as if some monster was raging on the streets of Manhattan. My God, what kind of monster is this? Carla's blue eyes shrank slightly, as if she saw something, showing a very surprised expression. Seeing this scene, Ko had some guesses in his heart, and then, like Carla, he directly used supervision to look at the place where the voices originated. Soon, a monster like a beeman appeared in his vision. The huge body of nearly 4 meters makes this monster very conspicuous in the chaos. The pillar-like thick arms and thighs are full of muscles. The huge strength allows him to fly a car easily, extending the spine of the skin and the bone spurs on the limbs, ferocious and aggressive. This big guy was running rampant on the streets of Manhattan. The weak defense line set up by the soldiers couldn't even stop him for a second. The chariot was torn apart, and the plane was pulled from the sky, like a toy model, torn to pieces. The ferocious firepower of the U.S. military didn't even leave a white mark on him, and he was defeated by him alone. This is abomination, Ko muttered to himself, a cold light flashed in his eyes. As mentioned in the previous chapter, when Ko and Carla's spacecraft was sailing towards the Earth, they encountered space-time turbulence, which caused them to travel to another world. But at the beginning, KO didn't notice it, and thought it was the space jump technology on the spacecraft that sent them directly to the Earth. It wasn't until the two lived a stable life and gradually came into contact with the outside world that Carl discovered the fact that he had time traveled again. The reason why it is so certain is because in the center of Manhattan, New York, stands a shiny skyscraper with the word, Stark, written in large characters with an aluminum alloy frame on the top of the tower. That's right, it's not DC, it's Marvel. Has the plot of Invincible Hulk already begun? KO looked at the familiar picture, in front of me, with supervision, and the plot of Invincible Hulk, in his memory slowly emerged from his mind. If there were no accidents, in the following time, the United States military would be beaten by hatred because they could not mobilize weapons of mass destruction. When the Green Titan appeared to play the role of the savior, he was abused first, and then he had an explosive attack, which can be called a classic routine in Hollywood movies. Definitely, no matter how the battle ensues, many innocent humans will suffer bad luck and even die in the process. And this time is the moment when those superheroes in the comics should appear the most. Thinking of this, KO turned his head helplessly, and then looked at the empty side without any surprise. I knew it. KO shook his head, then walked towards the cashier counter with the big bags in his hand. At the moment, Thaddeus Ross Jane's heart was full of fluctuations, and he was almost able to use the fluctuation punch. As an experienced U.S. Lieutenant General and a staunch supporter of the Hawk faction, General Ross has always felt that he has seen through the world of mortals and has become fearless. To be honest, he is not even afraid of monsters like Hulk, and he is even more fearless. The gods want to catch him back to study. What else in this world can make him afraid of Thaddeus Ross? As it turns out, there really are. A trace of cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Looking at the huge figure that kept roaring in the firelight, General Ross was shaken for the first time by the decision he had made. The rocket flew towards the target with a long flame tail, but the monster with huge amounts of poop seemed to have been aware of it for a long time, and at the moment it was about to hit, it suddenly blocked it with a backhand, as if waving away the smoke shooting down rockets with ease. With a boom, the raging fire formed by the explosion engulfed it fiercely, but such an attack obviously couldn't have any effect on this monster. Sure enough, in the blink of an eye, that huge amounts of figure walked out of the flames unscathed. The soldier who had just smeared it's face with RPG suddenly froze. Even though he was a warrior from an elite army, an emotion called fear could not help but spread from the bottom of his heart when facing this monster that could not even be harmed by mass-destructive thermal weapons. This is power. I am the strongest. Hate grinned at the camera, did not attack the helicopter of the TV station, and seemed to intend to show his invincible power in front of the whole world. Hate, whose real name is Bronsky, is an older elite warrior who, as he grows older, begins to crave power and return to the top. After injecting a small amount of super warrior serum, Bronsky's body almost reached the limit of the human body, equivalent to 0.6 Captain America, surpassing the state of his youthful peak, which made him swell for a while, feeling that he was omnipotent. However, how can a frog in a well know what real power is? In front of the Green Titan, even a super soldier is no different from a commoner. The Green Titan shattered his dream with just a random kick. If it weren't for the self-healing function of super serum, that one kick would have killed him 8 times. The desperate gap shattered Bronsky's pride and magnified his ambition. So in pursuit of power and to prove himself, he forced Samuel Stern to inject himself with a diluted blood sample of Green Titan. And thus, the abomination enslaved and driven by power was born. Unlike the Green Titan that Dr. Banner transforms into, the abomination's transformation is relatively stable. After transforming into an abomination, although Bronsky's character became more violent and arrogant, he was able to maintain considerable rationality and was able to use the fighting skills in the army in battle. Definitely, the shortcomings are also obvious. Like Hulk, he can't increase his strength infinitely with anger. He has a relatively fixed upper limit in strength. Maybe he can use his intelligent mind and fighting skills to suppress the Green Titan at the beginning, but in the end, he has only one way to lose. And for the audience who control the appearance, hatred has a fatal weakness. That's so ugly. Although the brutal appearance is full of deterrence and is more domineering than Hulk, not everyone can accept shit yellow. The Green Titan can at least remind everyone of the beloved neighbor, but the abomination is much more disgusting. He can only remind people of toilets and sewers. But even so, the power of abomination cannot be checked and balanced by the common army. Unless weapons of mass destruction are used, no matter whether it is S.H.I.E.L.D. or the United States Army, they can only be beaten. So, in the following time, these two ferocious titans fought a battle in the center of this street that made all the demolition companies in America feel ashamed. You punch, I kick, there are no extra moves, it is the most brutal and direct punch to the flesh, but because of the powerful violence far beyond the conventional, the damage caused is more terrifying than ordinary heavy thermal weapons. In this way, the two monsters were dismantled from the street to the end of the street, and then turned back. The high-rise buildings filled with steel and concrete, in front of them, are like paper, and they are all pushed down. The mayor of New York, who was watching the live broadcast, held his heart in distress, and called the military region over and over again, yelling for the army to drive away these two monsters. Meanwhile, the S.H.I.E.L.D. Trident headquarters. In the spacious office, a marinated egg wearing a black leather coat, that is, S.H.I.E.L.D. Director Nick Fury, is tapping his legs and looking at the huge display screen in front of him. Ordinary people watch the helicopter live broadcast, but he watched the satellite live broadcast, not to mention the clear picture quality, and the stereo surround sound. The roar of the Green Titan and the abomination is clearly audible, and I don't know how S.H.I.E.L.D. did it. At the moment, a tall beauty in a tight uniform came to Nick Fury and reported solemnly, "Sir, the Security Council has called and asked us to provide immediate support. We must eliminate the two monsters. Even if it doesn't work, we must get them out of Manhattan." It's no wonder that the Security Council is impatient. If it continues, it will lead to Wall Street, which is the center of the world economy. One bad thing is that the global stock market crashed. The next day, countless unlucky bankrupts lined up and jumped downstairs. The Security Council doesn't care about the unlucky ones who jumped off the building. They are afraid of their own economic recession and the devaluation of banknotes. This is no joke. Nick Fury heard the words, but he sneered and said, "It's easy to say. Where are you going, Brooklyn or Queens?" Hill also thought it was nonsense, but as an agent directly inserted by the Security Council, she still replied helplessly, "The Security Council will let you figure it out, anywhere, as long as it's not Manhattan." However, Nick Fury was unmoved, still knocking on Erlang's legs, and said indifferently, "Tell the Security Council that S.H.I.E.L.D. is helpless. To deal with this kind of thing, without using weapons of mass destruction, sending more reinforcements will only lead to death." Quote. Hill frowned, but the Security Council is very tough. Nick Fury patted the documents on the table, and compromisingly said, "General Ross's super soldier plan was approved by them, and now it's a big mess. Let S.H.I.E.L.D. wipe my ass. Do they think I look like straw paper? What's more, my people are agents, and my field of expertise is spying on intelligence. When it comes to fighting, the generals in the Pentagon are better at it." Hill hesitated to speak, but finally nodded and turned to leave. After the beautiful agent left, Nick Fury put down his crossed legs and looked at the big screen with a solemn expression. At some point in his palm, he was already holding a weird-looking BB camera. "I am the dividing line. 5th Avenue in Manhattan." An afterimage of green whizzed over and slammed into a tall commercial building, and the muscular loathing laughed wildly and rushed in. In less than 2 minutes, the Green Titan Hulk flew out of it again. The tens of meter-high building swayed twice during the earthquake and the mountain shook, and almost collapsed. Hate broke through the wall, walked slowly towards the Green Titan who was shaking his head like a hangover in the ruins, and laughed wildly, "Too weak, is this all you can do?" Defeating the powerful enemy who defeated him twice, the heart of hatred is satisfied. The surging and violent physical strength kept him in a state of excitement all the time. Although he would not lose his mind, it was by no means normal. However, the abomination is too lazy to care about these things. He just wants to show off his strength in front of the whole world. Defeating the Green Titan and the United States Army is only the first step. Next, he wants to destroy the entire Manhattan and let the world mention his power. The name is scary. Hulk. Seemingly understanding the words of hatred and sarcasm, the Green Titan Hulk finally stood up straight, and rushed over aggressively with a roar. The next moment, the four thick and powerful arms were like the horns of a bull, pressing against each other tightly, and the two sides stepped on the ground to create a large deep crack. This terrifying wrestling lasted for half a minute. The hatred engraved in his fighting instincts made the Green Titan suddenly lose his target, and his huge body lost its balance and fell forward. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he pounced on Hulk's body and slammed down his fist like a hammer, like a storm that destroyed everything. Weak. You are too weak, you only have this ability. Before the loathsome mocking sound could be finished, Hulk, who had received several heavy punches, raised his hand to block, and blocked the slammed giant fist. His ferocious face was full of anger, and his green eyes were shining with pure light. Roar! With a heavy punch, Bronski, who was on his body, was thrown away. The Green Titan let out a roar, and strode out with violent momentum, and the howling air rolled the dust. However, the hatred that was hid by accident for a while showed even more excited look in his eyes. That's right, this is the battle he longs for. Two titans with a height of nearly 4 meters jumped high, and their heavy fists collided loudly. The next moment, the huge amounts of shock force caused both sides to fly out, breaking through the rather narrow street for them. At the moment, the inhibitory serum in the Green Titan's body has basically dissipated. Without the influence of Dr. Banner's sanity, the awakened Green Titan slowly reversed its decline, from being suppressed by the Abomination to being on par with the Abomination. However, Abominations are unforgiving supervillains, but the Green Titan Hulk isn't much better. After transforming, he will only be dominated by endless rage, destroying almost regardless of enemy and friend, let alone protecting innocent citizens like a normal superhero. Therefore, under the combined force of these two titans, the streets of Manhattan are filled with reinforced concrete, and construction debris is scattered everywhere. Everything is like a hell on earth. At the same time, on the street where the two titans had just been destroyed, a cute little girl woke up from a coma. She rubbed her eyes, and all she could see were burning car wrecks, screaming crowds, and smoking buildings, and the whole world was coming to an end. Seeing the scene in front of her, the introverted girl was in a daze for a long time. In the end, she could only cover her head like an ostrich, squatting on the ground and crying. But the people running for their lives were afraid of running a step slower, and no one was willing to stop to rescue him. Among them was a man in a suit with a big belly who ran for his life in a panic and knocked down the little girl. The little girl was lying on the ground, her immature palm was wiped with blood by the rough ground, and the severe pain made her unable to bear it any longer and burst into tears. "Mom, Dad, where are you? Can anyone help me?" There were cries, shouts, and calls for help, and the little girl's voice could be said to be very weak. But such a weak voice was heard by a person who shouldn't exist in this world at this moment. A few seconds later, accompanied by a rush of tearing air sounds, all the surrounding sounds suddenly quieted down, leaving only the crackling sound of burning fire. The fleeing crowd seemed to have their throats held, their eyes widened in disbelief, and their running movements stopped abruptly. The little girl also felt that the light ahead was covered by shadows, so she stopped crying and raised her head to look suspiciously. Then, a striking red cloak came into her eyes. What it is? Nick Fury looked at the screen with a puzzled face, the red and blue figure speeding in the sky at high speed, with countless question marks instantly hanging on his big black bald head. He leaned forward and turned the screen around, his eyes fixed on the afterimages flashing around in the sky. SHIELD's technology is advanced, and the ultra-high refresh rate makes the picture very smooth. Even though the speed of this figure is extremely fast, after being slowed down by the computer at 100 times the speed, Nick Fury can still see her true face clearly. There is no doubt that this is a very beautiful blonde girl, with exquisite and bright features, which is unforgettable at a glance. Her upper body was wrapped in blues tights, and her slender legs were covered with knee-high red boots, which perfectly showed her tall and proud figure. And the red cloak that was lifted up by the wind pressure brought by the speeding landing on the back, raised like a battle flag, added a touch of heroic temperament to the girl, and made everyone who saw her true face feel heartbroken. Swaying, even some index fingers moved wildly. Definitely, considering that in the video she flies into the air and lifts up a broken building, I believe that 99% of men on Earth will give up those colored thoughts in their minds. As time passed, citizens of the United States who hadn't left the danger zone were quickly rescued by the blonde girl and left Manhattan without any reaction. The people who escaped from the dead looked at each other, as if they could see the word, dumb, in each other's eyes, wondering what auspicious day is tonight, when monsters that can only be seen in movies on weekdays suddenly gathered together seems to appear one after another. After being dazed, they all fell silent, suddenly feeling as if they knew nothing about this world. Have you found out her identity? Nick Fury, who silently put away the BB machine, stared intently at the video screen, looking like a blonde woman descended from a god, and asked the SHIELD staff seriously. Sir, we are screening her identity through facial recognition, and it will take about 10 minutes. Give you 3 minutes, I want to know all the information about this woman on Earth. Nick Fury replied with a cold face, but his heart was full of confusion, only feeling that the situation that was already out of control became more and more confusing. Hate is a monster created by the military's abuse of power, he knows it well, but what is this girl? Is it the mutant that has been hidden for many years, or is it an accidental product produced by scientific experiments like the Green Titan? If it's the former, it's fine, but if it's the latter, where did the other party come from? Why didn't she show her trace until now, and what is her purpose? In just a split second, the agent leader, who was suffering from the late stage of persecution paranoia, thought of a dozen related problems and analyzed them in his mind. Director, I think you or Shu Ying should read this. Hill agent, who did not know when to appear again, took out the tablet in his hand with some hesitation and said in a rather strange tone. What? Nick Fury, whose train of thought was interrupted, frowned in displeasure, but finally turned his attention to a picture displayed on the tablet. To be precise, it was a colorful cartoon page. On the clear cover, a young man also wearing a blue tights and a red cloak is floating above the sky, holding a passenger plane with a broken wing high above his head, like a god, under the reflection of the sun slowly descending from the sky. And beside this man, there is an English word printed in bold and bold. Superman, Superman, ... That's right, as you might imagine, this Marvel world is owned by DC Comics, but it went bankrupt many years ago. It is said that this is because during World War II in 1938, DC Comics, which had just been established at that time, created the world's first superhero, Superman, in the first issue of Action Comics, but the response was mediocre and did not win the public favorite. After the birth of Captain America in 1940, the mascot who sold the national debt crushed Superman, who was only an illusory character, with overwhelming popularity. However, in the last few years, a talented cartoonist suddenly appeared. With extremely exquisite painting style and meticulous plot, he restarted the Superman series of comics and won the love of countless comic lovers. Not only that, but this mysterious cartoonist has successively created superhero comic characters such as Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Cyborg, Martian Manhunter, etc., which once plunged the whole world into a superhero frenzy. Nick Fury, who has always wanted to create a team of superpowers, has heard about it, but as a soldier of the United States who survived World War II, he is not interested in the content of these comics, so he did not. I found that the dress of the blonde girl was so similar to that of Superman in the comics. Hill agent, are you trying to tell me that this girl is a character in this comic just like Superman? Nick Fury looked at this female subordinate with outstanding ability strangely, as if he was surprised by the other party's strange imagination. Agent Hill shrugged his shoulders, and said in a rather helpless tone, Director, don't forget what kind of world we are in. Since there are even existences like Mutant and Hulk, why can't there be Superman? As she spoke, she enlarged the image on the display screen, and said in a cautious tone, and look at this girl, she can also fly, she has great strength and amazing speed, and from the fact that she can accurately fly in every corner judging from the act of rescuing citizens, we can also assume that she has a perception ability similar to supervision. On the basis of these super abilities, if she still has heat vision and frozen breath, then she is a completely version of Superman. Quote. Listening to Hill's cocoon-like analysis, Nick Fury's face became more serious. Then he picked up the tablet in his hand, turned a few pages slightly, and just wanted to say something. But at this moment, the loud noise from the screen attracted his attention again. At the same time, above New York City, in the troposphere hundreds of thousands of meters above the ground, A young figure in a black sweater is floating there, looking down. A pair of blue eyes seem to pass through the barrier of space, and have a panoramic view of the battle between the two titans in the Manhattan block. However, watching the two monsters' large-scale demolition behavior in the city, the young man remained indifferent, as if watching a monkey show, without the slightest movement. It wasn't until the red cloak appeared that a smile gradually appeared on his face. "Master, someone is looking for Miss Carla's information. Do I need to block their network?" Suddenly, a gentle female voice sounded from his ear, but Carl was not surprised at all, but said as usual, "It doesn't matter, let them check if you want to check." Now that the Green Titans have already appeared, according to the development of the plot of the Marvel movie universe, there will definitely be many lively things happening in the next few days, and the existence of Carla and me cannot be hidden forever. Speaking of this, KO seemed to think of something, and suddenly said in a playful tone, "Luna, hack into SHIELD's network immediately, and send all the information about Hydra to that black stewed egg, which is also my gift in advance." "It's a gift to him." "No problem, Master." The female voice sounded again, and then spread all over the network of the whole world. Suddenly there was an incomparably powerful computing power, which overwhelmed the river and sea, and even many high-end artificial intelligences that were running were affected by it, and there was a short-lived, dead state. After they woke up, the terrifying computing power disappeared, and they quietly packed all the information about Hydra in the world, including the detailed list of members, and sent them to Nick Fury's personal terminal, quietly waiting quietly for his watching. And it is KO's artificial intelligence butler, Luna, who accomplishes these things. Luna is not an intelligence system from Krypton, but a super artificial intelligence customized by KO at a great cost when he was still in the main god space. In the past countless missions, Luna has helped him solve many problems, especially in the technological plane, where he is almost invincible. Among other things, in terms of network intrusion and defense methods, this artificial intelligence butler named Luna by KO can definitely beat 100 Ultrons and Skynet, even in the face of the so-called artificial intelligence in the DC universe. The peak, Brainiac, can also wrestle his wrists. Therefore, before KO was reincarnated on Krypton, he specifically asked the Lord God to leave behind several important props, and the information storage crystal USB flash drive with Luna is one of them. "Master, I have sent all the information about Hydra to Mr. Fury's personal terminal. In addition, I have copied a lot of information about supernatural phenomena in his encrypted files. There may be some of them that interest you." Thing. "Well done, Luna." It seems to be associated with the wonderful scene after Nick Fury learned the truth. KO couldn't help showing a nasty smile on his face. But after a while, his attention was turned back to the battlefield on Manhattan Street. In just a few minutes, Carla used her super speed to take all the people on 5th Street in Manhattan out of the danger zone. The United States Army and the New York police finally arrived too late, and in a burst of chaos reluctantly arranged the grooming work of these citizens to prevent the monsters from expanding the scope of the battle again. And after ensuring that no one would be affected, Carla didn't waste any more time, and even turned into an afterimage, flying towards the direction of the two culprits at top speed. "Green Titan Hulk, I want to see what kind of power this so-called infinite anger is," KO whispered to himself, and then a red light flashed in those blue eyes. ... At the same time, the battle between the two big guys is still in full swing, but the balance of victory has begun to show signs of tilting. Roar. On the street that had been completely reduced to ruins, a loud roar like a war drum rose into the sky, and immediately after that, two figures, one yellow and one green, rolled out of a dilapidated building. The yellow figure, that is, the abomination transformed from the ex-retired soldier. With his superb skills, he kicked the Green Titan Hulk away while entangled with it, destroying the small half of the street again. Hulk. Fanatical anger filled his heart, and the last bit of rationality in the Green Titan's eyes completely disappeared, replaced by a thick deep green. Perhaps because of the weakening of the anti-serum resistance, the personality belonging to Hulk once again gained the upper hand. In this state, the Green Titan, both in terms of strength and figure, seemed to have improved a bit. While running forward, the anger in the Green Titan's heart became more and more intense. His thick blood vessels were throbbing, and his extremely strong arm muscles seemed to explode. A heavy truck parked by the side of the road was directly smashed by him. The green monster waved its hands, tearing open the solid carriage, and its heavy body, which had swelled to 1,900 pounds, was like a runaway train, rumbling towards the opponent. Feeling the hatred of Hulk becoming stronger, he also grinned and bumped into it without flinching at all. But obviously, the abomination didn't gain the upper hand this time. Hulk, who was raging with anger, swung his fist and hit him on the chest. With a fierce blow, he knocked the retired soldier who turned into abomination to the ground. Then the Green Titan grabbed his thick calf again, and lifted the huge yellow titan into the air, like a Spartan warrior, roaring to the sky. Bronski, who had nowhere to focus, waved his hands, trying to break free from Hulk's grip, but he couldn't shake those firm palms that looked like cast iron. He was thrown heavily, like a boulder falling into a building, and exploded. Out huge amounts of bang. Hulk, in the series of battles, it was the first time that it had an absolute upper hand, which made the Green Titan beat his chest excitedly, raised his head and let out a deafening roar. Boom! But at this moment, the buzzing sound from the sky interrupted his angry howl, and when he realized that something was wrong, the second, more violent bombardment sound had already fallen. Boom! A heavier sonic boom sounded than before, and the air seemed to be distorted at this moment. Everyone in front of the TV seemed to vaguely hear the sound of bones breaking. The next moment, the Green Titan, which was still aggressive at first, flew upside down at an incomprehensible speed, collapsing several buildings in succession. A section of the broken floor crashed down, directly pressing him underneath. Looking back, where the Green Titan was before, there is an extra blonde woman suspended in midair, with a bright red cloak fluttering in the wind behind her, like the invincible Valkyrie in Legendary. Hate, who had just crawled out of the ruins, was stunned when he saw this scene, but soon, he gradually lost his judgment because of the endless fighting spirit, but his interest increased greatly. In line with the truth that the villain should die, Hate jumped in front of Carla, and said jokingly on his big ugly face, "Are you also a product developed by the military? Interesting, you can even fly, killing you will definitely great sense of accomplishment." As he said that, the hatred stepped forward and rushed to Carla in an instant, punching hard. The fierce punching wind tore Fang Yuan into a vacuum in the 3-meter space. Did not intend to give Carla a chance to struggle. But unfortunately, Hate didn't notice the sarcasm in the girl's eyes, and after swinging a punch confidently, the girl easily dodged it. Before he could change his move again, his muscular chest was hit head-on by a delicate fist. Boom! There was a muffled thunder, the front of the fist sank into the center of Abomination's chest and abdomen, and circles of ripples swayed on its steel-like tough muscle skin. The next moment, flesh and blood flew everywhere. I saw that the chest of the loathing turned into a depression almost the moment it touched the fist. The force of the explosion shattered his bones instantly, and all the important organs including the heart were stirred into a ball of finely minced meat. Dark yellow blood sprayed out, but the abomination didn't even make a scream. It flew backwards like a cannonball, hitting the building not far away, smashing the wall, leaving only a big broken hole. "That's it, hey," with such a loud tone. I thought it was powerful, but I didn't expect it to be so weak. Carla curled her lips, said in a contemptuous tone, and then flew forward to prepare for the final touch-up. A dead enemy is the best enemy, that's what KO taught. At the same time, this scene was broadcast live by the reporters in the helicopter in the sky, which shocked all the audience in front of the TV, as well as the attention of various forces, including Nick Fury from S.H.I.E.L.D. At the moment, the non-chief stared at his one eye, tightly locked onto Carla on the screen, panting heavily, telling that his heart was not peaceful. He seemed to be looking at a rare treasure, and his eyes were full of longing. "Director, this is all the information we have found about that girl." An agent trotted over and placed a dozen A4 papers filled with English on the desk in front of Nick Fury. Nick Fury picked it up in a hurry, and then used the agent method to quickly browse the above content, and quickly found a very critical piece of information from it. Ko Zoal, her cousin, is the manga artist who recreated the Superman manga. Thinking of the color manga he had randomly flipped through a few pages just now, Nick Fury couldn't help squinting the one remaining eye, and various indescribable emotions kept flashing from it. Really, is it just a coincidence? As we all know, any Kryptonian who has absorbed the energy of the yellow fixed star will have the infinite power to move mountains and fill seas in a very short period of time. On weekdays, even an ordinary punch can cause a terrifying effect comparable to an intercontinental missile. But now, the hatred that received Carla's blow from the front was naturally severely injured in an instant, and he was dying. Even though he had a super self-healing ability, he couldn't get up in a short time. On the contrary, the Green Titan, who had been kicked out by Carla before, fell from the sky with a roar, and stared at Carla with a pair of green eyes, full of anger and killing intent. Roar! The Green Titan beat his chest with his fists, his arms hit the ground continuously, and in a rumbling earthquake, he rushed straight to Carla. Sure enough, the energy in his body is stronger than before. High above the sky, Ko, who had never moved, looked at Fatty Green, who had swelled up again, and his thick black eyebrows could not help but slightly raised. The Green Titan Hulk is the product of Bruce Banner's injection of super soldier serum and gamma-ray radiation. It possesses superhuman strength, speed, physical strength, and extremely powerful self-healing ability. These abilities seem to be very common, just like Superman, like Captain America. Their basic attributes in all aspects are far beyond ordinary people, nothing special. But the power of the Green Titan is not as simple as common surpassing the limit, but can be strengthened almost without limit with anger, until it exceeds 100 times, 1,000 times, or even 10,000 times that of common people. When these most common basic attributes were multiplied thousands of times, the quantitative change led to a qualitative change, which is why the saying of Invincible Hulk came into being. It is true that, as a Kryptonian who has been exposed to the sun for 6 or 7 years, Carla's basic attributes far exceed those of a normal Green Titan. But if she can't kill the opponent directly and neatly in a short period of time, then she will face Hulk's continuous and intensified crazy offensive. And the longer you fight, the angrier the Green Titan will be, and the more powerful it will be. The infinite loop continues, and in the end, the Green Titan wins in all likelihood. Ho ho ho! The Green Titan's chest puffed up, and he shouted loudly, creating a vacuum area, and the sound wave rushed out like a tsunami after a brief second of stagnation. The ground in front of it was cracked, and the crack spread in a fan shape and collapsed inch by inch, and then was swept up by the hurricane, turning the sky into a rainstorm of rocks. Even if the ground is so solid, not to mention the construction waste all over the ground, together with the wreckage of the car, were all blown away by the force. Carla, who planned to completely eliminate the abomination, had to stop, with one arm in front of her body, and the red cloak on her back was constantly blowing. But her body remained motionless, and even after a short pause, she flew towards Hulk and punched him in the face. But this time, Hulk's reaction speed was significantly higher, and just as Carla was flying towards him, he made a stomping motion. Boom! Amidst the roar, the ground under Hulk's feet shattered like an egg breaking its shell, and the thrust generated made Hulk, with huge amounts of figure, rush towards Carla on the opposite side at a speed exceeding Mach 3. The punch came out, and he hit the past head-on. The next moment, two fists with huge amounts of difference in size collided in midair, splashing a turbid air wave in the air, carrying terrifying energy enough to destroy the entire Manhattan, and frantically swept away in all directions. Amidst the muffled sound, the surrounding ground suddenly collapsed for several meters, and gusts of wind scatter in all directions, sometimes grazing the ground and walls, crushing out terrifying spider web cracks in an instant. Then, amidst the billowing smoke, Carla and the Green Titan had a more intense fight than before. Different from the Green Titan who just wields his fists with astonishing strength, Carla has been trained by Ko often since she came to Marvel's Earth, and has already developed a good physical skill. It can be said that even without the Kryptonian's super ability, she can easily knock down 3 or 4 burly men with just fists and kicks. Coupled with the victory in all aspects of the basic attributes, so at the beginning of the battle, Carla almost beat the Green Titan, and the melon eaters watching the TV were stunned. The battle of just a few minutes was watched by the whole world, and everyone who knew the strength of the Green Titan fell silent. In the past few years, the United States military led by General Ross has pursued and suppressed the Green Titan. It can be said that apart from not dropping nuclear bombs, other methods have been used. But the result was that the MI Army suffered heavy losses, but the Green Titan was still at large. But at the moment, the blonde girl dressed like a comic book character in the video was able to firmly suppress the Green Titan in a frontal battle, pressing the opponent to the ground like plasticine and rubbing hard. General Ross, who was on the verge of collapse, sat on the helicopter for a long time without saying a word. Even if his daughter clamored for him to help Bruce, he ignored him. The nearly 50-year-old Army Lieutenant General silently lit a cigarette and began to think about whether to continue to capture the Green Titan in the future, or to take the blonde chick below as a new target. Not to mention the secret plans of various forces, the battle between Carla and the Green Titan has also begun to continuously upgrade. Hulk, the Green Titan, which had been strengthened several times because of extreme anger, pressed its chest against Carla's forceful punch. Then he flipped his hands and grabbed the girl, and after being dodged by her, he chased up with another punch. But this time Carla chose to avoid it, and instead opened her big Kaziran eyes wide, from which scorching energy condensed extremely quickly, and finally formed two thumb-thick red rays of light that hit the big man in front of her. Then with the sound of screams, the Green Titan crashed into a wall again. However, this time he stood up very quickly, the wounded muscles in his chest twisted and healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Carla, just as KO expected, as time passed, the Green Titan, who was getting more and more angry, finally unearthed the huge energy hidden in his body. In the process of being tortured by Carla, his strength, speed, defense, endurance, and self-healing ability began to rise steadily. Every time he stood up again, it seemed that there was visible progress. This kind of bug like a small strong set, leaving Carla speechless. After another 10 minutes, Carla, who realized that her own strength could no longer gain any advantage, changed her strategy instantly, from melee combat to long-range kite flying. While scalding the Green Titan with the laser-electric eyes, hot eyesight, of staring at whoever dies, she screamed, and at the same time made a supersonic dash from time to time, slamming herself into the Green Titan like a cannonball, trying to use this way to cause harm to the opponent. As for the final result, of course it still failed. Although Hulk, who turned into a Green Titan, has an impressive IQ and completely lacks the extraordinary wisdom of Dr. Banner, but the opponent's fighting instinct, which is even more beast than beast, allowed him to gradually adapt to Carla's attack mode and find restraint in battle. Kryptonian methods. It's just a simple way of slapping both hands with shockwave, but it hits Carla's weakness with overpowering senses very precisely. For Carla, who has super hearing, the huge amounts of applause are equivalent to the sound of the common people's ears. Put a tweeter on the side and play the Qinghai Tibet Plateau at a volume of 200 decibels. Soon, Carla was stunned by the sound that hit the soul directly, and fell into a semi-comatose state for a short time, almost falling from the sky. Seeing this scene, the Green Titan would naturally not be polite. He let out a low growl, and appeared above Carla in an instant, his fists and fingers combined, like a giant hammer swung down. The airwaves rolled violently around the Green Titan. With the hidden friction of red, the impact force was strong enough to rival that of a scorpion falling from the sky. Meteorite. Hulk. Smash. A surging force gushes out, the powerful momentum oppresses and displaces the air, creating a hurricane out of thin air and sweeping the audience. A large cloud of dust is rolled up, and the momentum is particularly frightening. Carla woke up from the trance, and saw a lump of huge amounts of green falling from her head. In the panic, she forgot to dodge, and directly raised her arms to block the front. Boom! In an instant, a large sunken crater appeared on the broken ground, with a distance of nearly 100 meters. Cobweb cracks spread rapidly, and the entire street shook like an earthquake. The dim yellow air waves spread around like corrugated boards, rolling up thick dust and gravel, and buried the surrounding things in the blink of an eye, making it impossible to see the picture clearly. Nick Fury and other secretly observing forces were anxious, eager to know the situation inside, but within 2 seconds, an inexplicable energy suddenly surged, blowing away all the surrounding dust, and then revealed I saw the 3 figures inside. Etc. 3 ways. The pupils of the people who discovered this constricted, and quickly mobilized their own satellites to enlarge the picture on the video screen. I saw that in front of the blonde girl, there was already a tall and vigorous figure at this moment. From the physical point of view, the other party should be a very young man. He was wearing a black sweater with a hood covering half of his head. With the help of the weak light, he could barely see half of his face below his nose. Definitely, what surprised everyone the most was that this person was holding his hands high at the moment, firmly grasping the 2 wrists of the Green Titan, and slowly lifting them upwards. Another monster. The hearts of everyone in front of the TV were numb, saying that they could no longer speak. At the same time, the ferocity on the Green Titan's face gradually turned into confusion, and he wanted to back away as soon as he moved his footsteps, but his two fists were held tightly by an irresistible force at this moment, and he couldn't move even an inch with all his strength. Hulk was dumbfounded by the unprecedented experience, and the silly couple stood there with a bunch of question marks on their foreheads, turning into a green man with question marks. The man in black, that is, KO, did not intend to answer his questions, but turned his head slightly, looked at Carla who was already smiling behind him, and said softly, "Leave this green guy to me, you go and get rid of that ugly monster before, don't forget, he is the real culprit." Although he has been sitting on the sidelines before, this is because KO wants Carla to accumulate more experience in fighting superpowers, so as not to become confused when encountering more difficult guys in the future. Definitely, it doesn't mean that KO is going to let Carla get hurt, and that he'll still intervene if something dangerous happens. Just like now. The blonde girl who was beating the Green Titan like a female Tyrannosaurus before nodded without any awkwardness, and even looked at it with pity before leaving, still struggling to get the Green Titan out of her hands, and finally said with a chuckle, "Don't be too late, I'm still waiting to go back to eat the dinner you made." Rest assured, KO smiled, and then, under the angry gaze of the Green Titan, he stretched his thick arms outward. It only takes 5 minutes. Chapter 11. After hearing KO's promise, Carla flew into the sky, and soon used supervision to find the abomination that was fleeing quietly, and chased it away. As for KO, they also started to act. I saw his slender 5 fingers slightly retracted, clasp the Green Titan's wrist, and force the opponent to walk out of the big pit step by step. Even though the Green Titan exerted crazily, he couldn't break free from the tightly clasped palms like iron clamps. At this moment, KO suddenly let go of the Green Titan's wrist, and when the opponent backed up, a whip kick kicked him at the back of the knee. When the Green Titan knelt down on one knee, he clenched his fist with his left hand again and hit the Green Titan's throat heavily. Severe pain came from his throat, and the Green Titan grunted, clutching his throat in pain, and almost fell backwards. But at the next moment, he was pulled back by KO's arm, and then there was a set of continuous combination punches. Straight punches, swing punches, copy punches, whip kicks, kick kicks. For a moment, there seemed to be countless KOs in front of the Green Titan, and the fierce offensive was pressed down like a wall, and the endless moves made the Green Titan screamed again and again, and was pushed back all the way. Blood was flying, energy was flying, and the sound of explosions was endless. The aftermath of the battle directly blew up the buildings along the way, and the steel jungle built by human civilization was completely annihilated under the powerful body of the Kryptonians, as fragile as thin paper. The Green Titan was pushed back nearly 100 meters, and the sound of bones breaking was like fried beans. When KO stopped, there was no whole piece of good meat in his body, and the huge amounts of body were also crumbling. Boom! It was another heavy punch, hitting the Green Titan to his knees, and then a pair of white hands held his head and pressed it down, and at the same time, he bumped his head with a knee. With a muffled sound, the Green Titan staggered and collapsed to the ground, but KO keenly sensed that the green energy in his body was expanding further, so he grabbed his ankle decisively, turned around and stepped forward, swung his arms round and dropped, hit it hard on the ground. Boom! The ground trembled, Hulk raised his head and coughed out a mouthful of hot blood. A flash of fear flashed in the dark green pupils, but soon this fear was replaced by anger, which turned into a more intense and monstrous anger. More surging power came from his body and was about to explode, but the next moment his ankle was tightly clasped again, and a huge force pulled him, breaking up the power he had just surged up. Immediately afterwards, Hulk's eyes were spinning, and the tearing air sounds whizzed in his ears. When he realized that he had been dragged by KO's ankles, he flew vertically into the sky at the speed of breaking the sound barrier, flying higher and higher until the lights of New York City connected into one piece. It stopped when it became the file size of the nail cap. The Green Titan left the ground, and his limbs danced violently, trying to escape, but KO's strength was far superior to the Kryptonians of common. Even though the brute force of the Green Titan had been raised to a level comparable to that of Carla, he still couldn't get rid of his imprisonment. After reaching a height close to the atmosphere, KO loosened his grip on the Green Titan, and then flew to his back, pushing the Green Titan straight down, accelerating continuously. Triple Mach, 5 times Mach, Mach 10 times. When the speed of any matter reaches such a limit, the energy it bears will inevitably rise rapidly, let alone a monster that originally contains powerful power like Green Titan. When the two are combined, what is produced is beyond imagination strong destructive power. Green Titan's IQ couldn't understand KO's plan, but Beast's instinct kept alerting him, making him struggle desperately. However, the disparity in power levels made him helpless, and even the roaring mouth was poured into the gust of wind, and fell silent for an instant. KO's 10 fingers were inserted into the muscles behind the Green Titan, and he continued to accelerate against him, and finally fell straight down from the sky like a shooting star rubbing the red flame. Previously seen by the successive bright streets, when the height was less than 100 meters from the ground, KO finally let go of the Green Titan, deflected gravity along the arc, and flew into the sky again. The Green Titan kicked its legs weakly, like a red-hot Luot, surrounded by hot waves of fire, smashing hard into the ground. The earthquake-like vibe spread out, and the entire Manhattan area trembled 3 times. Cracks climbed up to tall buildings like creepers, and gravel and dust fell one after another, covering the ground. It's really tough enough. KO stood in midair, and Black Sweater was still intact under the protection of the biomagnetic field. He looked down at the fire of anger that had not been extinguished in the pit, and grinned involuntarily. In the next second, red lines like cracks suddenly appeared around his eye sockets, and those blue pupils also turned into a scarlet color at the same time. Hot sight. It's just different from Carla's thick thumb and thin light beam. KO's heat sight is more appropriate to use the word cannon to describe it. In everyone's shocked eyes, 2 crimson beams of light swelled against the wind after leaving KO's eye sockets, and turned into energy light cannons with a diameter of 10 meters in a blink of an eye. He devours. Boom. Rumble. The loud noise like a nuclear explosion pierced the sky, like an erupting solar flare, emitting brilliant and colorful light. The vast energy with the momentum of overcoming thorns and thorns, all the way up, dispelling the dark clouds in the sky. After an unknown amount of time, the light gradually dissipated, and in the already messy Manhattan street, a huge circular groove with a width of about 50 meters and an unknown depth suddenly appeared. The nearby ground was even scraped off a layer, and with the surrounding bustling high-rise buildings, it looked extremely desolate and empty. At the same time, the eyes of the melon eaters in front of the TV stared blankly, and even the remote control in their hands fell, and they didn't recover for a long time. Looking at the huge sinkhole on TV, and thinking about the monsters that appeared one after another tonight, while being frightened, I couldn't help but ask myself, MMP, is this really New York? Military. White House. Shield. I really want to know too. ... A minute later, KO's body lightly fell to the ground. Following the breath induction, he raised his hand to set off a hurricane, swept away the gravel and soil debris, and saw the Green Titan whose muscles and bones were broken, and more air was released than air was taken in. At this time, Green Titan was in a very bad state. His chest collapsed, his limbs were twisted at strange angles, but his tenacious vitality made him hang his breath, but only one eyeball covered in Green's blood was left, staring at KO closely, let out a meaningless growl from the corner of his opened mouth. It's not dead. KO was speechless, although as a well-informed reincarnation person, he had seen many beings who claimed to be immortal, but even so, the tyrannical vitality of the Green Titan still surprised him a little. However, there is still a limit after all. Seeing the Green Titan's obviously much slower self-healing speed, KO's eyes flashed red again, intending to give him another hot gaze. But at this moment, the Green Titan in a semi-comatose state whimpered twice, his huge body slowly shrunk, Green's skin dissipated, and he returned home modestly, letting the naked Dr. Banner come out to take the blame. Poor Dr. Banner was wearing a pair of oversized elastic pants on his lower body. He was lying unconscious on the ground, and his thin arms had no sense of strength at all. It's hard to imagine that such a person can turn into an unstoppable Green Titan when he gets angry. The red light in KO's eyes dissipated quietly, looked at Banner who was helpless, curled his lips and walked away. If it's still a Green Titan Hulk, KO doesn't mind making up for it, but Dr. Banner doesn't matter. KO lacks interest in him and has no desire to kill him. Boom. There was a loud noise, and a huge dark yellow object hit KO not far away. He raised his head and spat out bloody yellow blood. His body was covered in cuts and bruises, his left arm disappeared completely, and there were still faint scorched marks in the wound. It is the escaped abomination. Carla's figure descended from the sky, and his feet stepped on the chest and abdomen of the hateful, making him let out another scream. Seeing that the other party was almost dying, there was no sympathy in Carla's eyes, the scorching energy gathered in the eyes, and the radiance of red made people tremble with fear. Hate's pupils shrank suddenly, stung by Red's brilliance, his eyes almost couldn't be opened. I surrender, please let me go. Carla was unmoved, and said indifferently, when you were slaughtering, did you ever stop because you begged for mercy? The girl is not the virgin girl Superman who was brainwashed by a big blue guy in the DC next door. She was trained by KO in her 3 views. Although she is still righteous and kind in her heart, this kindness never favors and hates such vicious villains. In the past few years, she has worn this battle suit many times in various war-torn places in the world, saved many lives, and personally executed some inhuman. Touched, but a hint of ridicule rose in my heart. KO, who walked to her side, was very satisfied after hearing the girl's words, and lamented that his years of teaching Tiao education Zhao were not in vain. As for Carla's questioning, the hatred was naturally speechless, and he finally smashed the pot and laughed wildly. Killing is the birthright of the strong. I am stronger than them, so I can decide their life and death. You were right, Carla said indifferently, and then aimed at the eyeballs of hatred. The red light in the eyes suddenly flourished. So I can also decide your life and death. After all, the heat sight that was ready to go fell, and the scorching energy as high as the surface temperature of the sun pierced through the brain of the abomination, melting the brain tissue into a gaseous state in an instant. At the same time, the huge body under his feet gradually lost its vitality. It is finally over. A few seconds later, Carla exhaled heavily, and the delicate and beautiful face showed a relaxed look. To be honest, today's battle was not easy. The ugly monster under his feet was okay, but the key was that big green man. He was too resistant to beating. What's more, the more he fought, the stronger he became, and he was able to compete with himself in strength in just 10 minutes. It is conceivable that if KO hadn't appeared later, the outcome of this battle tonight might still be unknown. Thanks for having you here. Looking sideways at Bruce Banner, who had returned to his normal body shape in the ruins, Carla frowned and asked, leave him alone. This guy's ability is quite tricky. Don't worry about him. Speaking of which, this guy is also an unlucky guy. The things he did before were not completely voluntary. KO shook his head, negating the hint in Carla's words. Go home, the battle just now should have consumed a lot of your physical strength. Take a good rest, these things will be handled by specialized personnel. KO walked up to the girl, held her hand and said slowly. Specialized person, the shield you mentioned? Carla asked curiously. Apparently, during all these years of living on Earth, KO had somehow told her something about the world. That's right, it's them. KO nodded, then looked at Carla with a slightly deep expression and said, actually, after what happened tonight, the existence of you and me will definitely be suppressed. SHIELD, and all other forces on the planet are watching closely. The days to come may not be as easy as before. Carla, are you ready? Definitely, the girls of the Al family are not afraid of any challenge. After saying this sentence without any hesitation, the beautiful blonde girl showed a charming smile, hugged KO's neck intimately, stood on tiptoe, and skillfully used the S logo on her chest to dawdle the solid and reliable chest under the boy's clothes. And, KO, you'll protect me too, won't you? Hey, it's right to set up flag. Did you know that? KO smiled lightly and shook his head, but still put his arms around the girl's slender and soft waist, and then gently kissed her on the forehead. However, you're right, as long as I'm here, nothing in this world can hurt you. I promise. The dust settled. After killing the abomination and spreading a few meals of sour-smelling dog food, the two brothers and sisters from Krypton disappeared into the distant sky holding hands, and no one could trace their whereabouts. On the other hand, as KO said, the mess they left behind was quickly cleaned up. For example, the disgusting broken corpse, and Dr. Banner who is unconscious, these are all sought-after goods, and there are not too many people who are willing to take over. At the same time, many people in this world are also unable to sleep at night. For example, the military bosses who watched the live broadcast of Superman vs. Hulk, all the way, after seeing KO smashing the Green Titan in a devastating way, they tried to pick up the jaw that fell on the ground, and they were speechless, except from everyone's eyes seeing the shock. I couldn't say anything. They are worrying about the super soldier project. The military has spent 70 years pursuing the perfect super soldier, and successfully created the Saint Captain America. The Green Titan is not counted, he belongs to the accident of the experimental runaway. The power is terrifying, but he has no brains, and can do nothing but destroy. But even so, the military has never given up its desire for super soldiers. They always feel that they are only one step away from success. Now, the presence of the KO siblings has kicked that foot off. Two freaks suspected of being cartoon characters descended into the world like a big devil, slapped them hard, and taunted them mercilessly with powerful force. Don't be such a super soldier, that kind of rookie I can hit 100. Confusion, loss, fear, anxiety. The military headquarters was silent, and everyone had mixed feelings in their hearts, and they didn't know what to say. But it is impossible to give up, not in this life. You must know that the military has spent at least 70 years painstakingly researching the Super Soldier Project. The manpower and materials consumed in the process are beyond the imagination of common people. However, some high-level executives questioned, even if it continues, what's the point? A new era has arrived, and super soldiers are already outdated before they even get on the assembly line. Yes, after all, it was a plan 70 years ago, and it should be eliminated by the times. Maybe we can catch them. An old general wearing the rank of general opened his mouth to speak, but he closed his mouth halfway through the eyes of his colleagues who cared for the mentally handicapped. This kind of monster is just an example. The super soldier plan has not failed, and it is still full of value. A very senior general calmly analyzed, which attracted everyone's approval. 70 years, a lifetime of painstaking efforts, they are not willing to just give up. And the most important thing is, just give up like this, who bears the loss? I will not carry this pot. If you want to give up the super soldier plan, that's fine, I'll talk about it after I go home for the elderly. After thinking this through, everyone looked a lot better. The super soldier project is still very interesting. A Captain America may not be able to defeat KO-level monsters, but what about 1,000 or 10,000? If you are lucky and create a controllable Green Titan-level powerhouse, you will make a lot of money. In addition to the United States military who wanted to make trouble, the 5 hooligans of the World Security Council also started a video call overnight, but no one spoke. After 5 minutes of silence, the meeting ended. After that, Nick Fury's Avengers was officially licensed, the green light was bright all the way, and even the financial allocation was also a lot richer. As for other forces in the world who are concerned about Manhattan, they have also been silent. For example, Hydra, who was hiding in the dark, suddenly discovered that the water in this world seemed to be very deep, and it was a good thing for them to lurk. Several high-level leaders got together and concluded after discussion that Hydra must have its own superpower in order to gain a foothold in the new world. Before that, it was right to keep a low profile. Anyway, they haven't kept a low profile for a day or two, so there is nothing to be ashamed of. SHIELD Trident headquarters, seeing the Green Titan falling into autism, will follow Dr. Banner. Although Nick Fury still has a flat poker face on the surface, his clenched fists tremble slightly, revealing his innermost feelings: fear. Yes, he is afraid of the power of KO and Karla. After all, in his opinion, the power possessed by these young men and women is too terrifying, beyond the control of SHIELD, and even the entire Earth civilization. The blonde girl named Karla is lucky to say that she is at the same level as the Green Titan at most. Although it is difficult to deal with, as long as she can pay huge amounts of price, there is still a possibility of victory. But the black-clothed man who appeared in the back, or KO Zoal, was different. That godlike mighty force was not at the same level as the blonde girl, and he easily knocked back the Green Titan. The truth was revealed, and according to his agent King's observation ability, the other party hadn't even used his real skills. With such an existence, I am afraid that even decades of Captain Marvel may not be able to compete. Definitely, most importantly, Nick Fury seriously suspects that this couple is not Earthlings at all. Just like the comics drawn by KO, they are actually life from aliens, and Superman is a character created based on them. If this is the case, what are they trying to do hiding on the Earth, to observe human evolution, or to conquer the world? If one day they come up with a whim and want to destroy the world, who can stop them? As soon as this idea came up, Nick Fury felt a little bad all over. He immediately raised the threat level of the two KO siblings to the highest level, and ordered his agents to immediately investigate the DC Comics company that collapsed decades ago. The author who was able to draw Superman for the first time was invited to have tea in S.H.I.E.L.D. In addition, he sent countless people to disguise their identities to lurk near the residence of the siblings according to the intelligence, to monitor their every move, and even sent the ace agent who was carrying out the mission, Natasha Romanoff, known as Black Widow, through private phone calls. Romanov was transferred back and went to explore the secrets of the siblings himself. After ordering these things, Nick Fury walked back to the office with a tired face, silently poured the hair tonic he carried with him on his scalp and massaged gently, feeling a lot of emotion in his heart. But then, a pop-up email suddenly popped up on the computer in front of him, interrupting his chaotic thoughts. Time flies, and a month has passed in the blink of an eye. No matter how popular the topic is, it will fade sometimes, even if the topic is so big that people can talk about it for a long time. The monster battle that took place in the Manhattan neighborhood a month ago finally calmed down under the official guidance and deflection. It's all about it. Although these topics still exist in major newspapers and portal websites, many of them are no longer the headlines, and they no longer maintain the fiery attention they once had. The focus of attention has also changed from the huge loss caused by the collapse of Manhattan to the official construction of Manhattan and the implementation of a series of aftermath. Among them is the huge deep pit caused by KO's super thermal site. Later, after geological experts surveyed, this deep pit melted by high temperature was 2 kilometers away from Fangyuan, and the geological structure was completely destroyed. It is no longer suitable to build the foundation of high-rise buildings after spending a lot of money on filling. In this regard, the New York government reluctantly gave up the plan to rebuild the business circle, but was unwilling to give up this prime location, so it hired a large number of laborers to build a small artificial lake based on this. Until recent days, the New York government has vigorously promoted the tourism industry and built a central park around the lake, which is officially called Manhattan Theme Park. On the first day the park was built, it attracted tourists from all over the world. The world is never short of people watching the excitement. People who once saw Superman vs. Hulk in front of the TV came here for sightseeing in an endless stream, which greatly stimulated the nearby economic consumption. The New York government made money, laughing you can't keep your mouth shut. However, the official naming has never been accepted by the public. Compared with Manhattan Theme Park, New Yorkers prefer to call it Superman Park or Monster Park wide. By the way, since Carla and KO didn't mean to hide anything, some netizens soon discovered that their ability was very similar to Superman in the comics, and launched countless discussion posts on the internet. DC Comics also ushered in a new round of hot deals. In particular, a certain writer KO, who didn't want billion, took advantage of the heat of the Manhattan incident, quickly used super speed to drive out a series of comics with the theme of female Superman. To the extent that demand exceeds supply. And this writer naturally gained a lot, earning a lot of small money. Definitely, these are irrelevant digressions, so I won't repeat them here. More than a month has passed like this. KO thought that the black stewed egg in S.H.I.E.L.D. would visit soon, but the other party was surprisingly quiet except for a lot of eyeliner near his studio and apartment. I had no intention of contacting him at all. KO lamented that Nick Fury was so powerful that he could bear it, and continued to wait. He was waiting for the space gem to emit fluctuations. He unabashedly explained the existence of Kryptonians in the comics, and blew up the Green Titan in full view, in order to create a sense of crisis and let Nick Fury start the Space Gem research plan ahead of schedule. And when the god of decline, Loki, officially descends with the Mind Gem, his purpose is the real beginning. After being idle, KO continued to discuss the mysteries of life with Carla heartlessly, and at the same time began to train Carla to become a real superhero. Unlike former reincarnations who used to keep a low profile, since Carla killed the abomination a year ago, it seemed like a switch was turned on, and she began to appear frequently in all corners of the world, chasing or stopping some troublesome things that ordinary people could not solve. Quote. For example, in a war-torn area like the Middle East, she once calmed down easily with one person, and even created a nuclear explosion by herself, burying those heinous terrorists and trying to prevent the occurrence of war. Definitely, such behavior has aroused the dissatisfaction of many national governments, thinking that the female Superman is nosy and violates the sovereignty of their own land. But what is interesting is that the people in these countries support the female Superman almost overwhelmingly and regard her as a savior. They even organized female Superman support teams all over the world, and the limelight has gradually surpassed that of another New York superhero, Iron Man. The reason for this is that in addition to the extremely high appearance of the female Superman, which is easy to attract fans, the promotion of DC Comics also played a great role. All, in one sentence, Carla is on fire. As for KO himself, he is more like a superhero behind-the-scenes team, making suggestions for his cousin, and will not take action easily, and this also makes all parties more curious about his purpose and more vigilant. The dull and busy days passed day by day, and the theme park in Manhattan was under construction, until one day, an anecdote was reported in the entertainment section. In the New Mexico wilderness, a lightning-flashing object fell from the sky, smashing huge amounts of craters. But that object was neither a spaceship nor some extraterrestrial meteorite. It's an exquisite shape and a very special style, a hammer. Puente Antigua, New Mexico. This is a town that rose due to the mining industry. It covers a small area and has a population of only 1,000 people. Now, however, this small town has become a gathering place, because just last night, Thor, the eldest son, Hela is the eldest daughter, of Odin, Lord of the Nine Worlds, came to this place. It's just that His Highness Thor didn't feel the slightest joy in this experience of going down to earth. To be exact, Thor felt really wrong. To be honest, he was planning to be crowned king yesterday, but today he was ruthlessly exiled by his old man. This made Thor so wrong that he wanted to cry. At 1,500 years old, he felt that he was under pressure that did not belong to his age. And it doesn't matter if it's just being exiled, the key is that his divine power has been deprived. After losing his divine power, after being exiled to Midgard, he was directly beaten up by several passing Midgards in partnership because he was too miserable. The worst thing is that he is still imprisoned on a bed. Doctors administered such strong anesthesia and sedatives that he is now paralyzed. Joke. He is the son of Odin. Thor Odinson, when did you suffer this kind of grievance? You despicable Midgardians, how dare you? Release me immediately, or you will meet the wrath of the Thunder God. Thor roared while trying to break free from the bound hands. Frankly speaking, according to the physical fitness and strength of a normal human being, this is not realistic. However, his quarrel still had some effect, at least. He was anesthetized again by the doctor who came after hearing the news. On the outskirts of Puente Antique Town, many people gathered around a huge crater at this moment, and in the center of the huge crater, which looked like a meteorite smashed open, a silver square metal war hammer engraved with complicated patterns quietly lying on the pit. This uniquely shaped metal warhammer, named Mjolnir, is cast by dwarf from Asgard's unique metal Uru in Norse mythology. It can carry magic spells and hold huge energy, summoning wind, rain, thunder and lightning, four natural elements. Definitely, this is just a rendered and exaggerated myth legendary. In fact, in Marvel's plot, the so-called Mjolnir is actually Aesir god King Odin, let dwarf use the material extracted from the core of a fixed star that is about to be annihilated to cast it, and after the blessing of the Nordic gods, it has indestructible characteristics and powerful divine power. It can be said that once the blessing of this artifact is lost, Thor, known as Thor, can only exert a quarter of his combat power at most. But now, residents living in nearby towns have discovered this magical weapon from heaven, and the busybodies who are idle are trying to pick up the hammer one after another, but none of them succeed. Even heavy trucks and cranes were used, and they couldn't shake it a bit. Through word of mouth, more and more people gathered here, and then, nothing more. On the second day after Mjolnir came, black cars drove into the town, and people in black suits and sunglasses stepped out of the cars. The leader is a gentle-looking man in his 40s. From his hairline that breaks through the sky, it can be seen that this person should be the village head of the novice village in the Marvel world, Phil Coulson. Speaking of which, this one was also a very important supporting character in the early stage of the Marvel movie, and his performance in the movie is also called a model worker. He was busy on the set of Iron Man, he was also in charge when Mjolnir fell to New Mexico, and he was also busy in the Avengers Alliance 1 movie when S.H.I.E.L.D. lost Tesseract. And during this period, because KO sent the Hydra information to the non-chief chief, Phil Coulson was also privately authorized by him to investigate the S.H.I.E.L.D. ghost. The reason for this suspected supernatural phenomenon is really very busy. It stands to reason that if an agent is responsible for two cases at the same time, it is likely that due to lack of duplication skills, both parties will be overwhelmed and eventually lead to the failure of the mission. But the non-chief chiefs still go their own way, insisting that Phil Coulson do it himself. Definitely, he didn't do this because Phil Coulson's ability is against the sky, he can't beat S.H.I.E.L.D. all over the place, but he really can't trust others anymore. A month ago, the list KO sent was too shocking. If it is accurate, then the entire Trident headquarters, 10 S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, 8 of them are suspected Hydra. Thinking of this possibility, even if he is as calm as Nick Fury, his heart can't help but feel cold. It's just that he is extremely suspicious, and he will never trust this information, so he secretly asked his most trusted subordinate, Phil Coulson, to organize a secret team to investigate the inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. and verify the authenticity of this list. And as a result, the remaining half of his heart was completely chilled. In this way, the non-chief chief blacklisted all the personnel on this list, as well as the agents promoted by the former Chief Pierce, regardless of their position, and asked Phil Coulson to personally form a trustworthy special team to secretly complete the tasks assigned by him. At the same time, African chiefs are also paying more and more attention to supernatural events in the world, especially after the appearance of the KO brothers and sisters. His idea of forming an extraordinary army is even more urgent. Closer to home, with huge amounts of crater outside, Phil Coulson glanced at the short-handled square hammer in the center, then turned around and said to the communicator, "Director, I've arrived. Lock down the site, isolate the contents of the crater, and allow no one near it except the researchers." Nick Fury ordered. "Understood, Chief." Phil Coulson nodded knowingly, and then called the accompanying agents to act. A few minutes later, countless tall men in well-fitting suits appeared one after another, drove everyone away, and then announced that everyone had dispersed and there was nothing to see, it was just a fragment of a satellite. As for whether there are real fragments inside, they say it is definitely that. Definitely they also seem to know that this reason is a bit too nonsense. They also said that there are some meteorites from outer space besides the satellite fragments. These meteorites carry a huge amount of radiation and need to be quarantined for inspection. Looking at the guns on the waists of the people in black, the residents said that they are right, those are meteorites, they have radiation, they need to be quarantined and inspected, can't we all believe it? It didn't take long for these agents to seal off the entire site where the hammer landed, and ask the accompanying workers to set up barbed wire and watchtowers, and build a simple anti-cosmic radiation laboratory around Mjolnir. After everything was ready, Phil Coulson led a group of experts belonging to S.H.I.E.L.D. into the laboratory. However, the head of the novice village in the Marvel world didn't know that just a few minutes ago, an uninvited guest had quietly arrived here. Wearing the same black sweater as before, KO walked into the empty S.H.I.E.L.D. temporary command post like a walk. At the moment Phil Coulson is leading a group of agents to evacuate the town's residents, and those left behind are civilians. He walked in as if no one else was there, and the patrolling guards and agents seemed to turn a blind eye to this stranger. No, it should be said that they are really invisible. This is the well-known passive ability of Kryptonians, the advanced application of biological force field, which can produce a special optical reaction with the surrounding light by changing the frequency of the force field, forming an effect similar to invisibility. Even a camera cannot detect this kind of camouflage. Definitely, if you use a heat detector or other higher-end instruments, you can still find the existence of KO, but the artificial intelligence, Luna, has made up for this defect, making all the current technological means on the Earth lose in front of him played a role. Just like that, the light footsteps stopped in the middle of the deep pit. KO looked at the silver warhammer standing quietly in front of him, and a thoughtful look flashed in Wei Blue's eyes. Speaking of which, this hammer named Mjolnir is also considered a famous artifact in the Marvel Universe, but its most famous place is not the power originally possessed, but how many people can wield it lift it up. On weekdays, Thor often thinks that no one else can lift it, and only I can lift it to show my uniqueness, but in fact there are quite a few people who can lift this hammer. For example, the Captain America in Marvel Comics and Avengers Alliance 4, the ruthless Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, Magneto who has completely integrated the magnetic field ability, Vision with the power of Mind Gem, the Little Rascal and Storm in X-Men, these guys have all lifted it. In addition, on the set next door, his cheap brother who has not met, and Wonder Woman Diana can also lift Mjolnir. Looking at it this way, this powerful artifact from the Aesir Protoss is really a bit flamboyant and will not refuse anyone who comes. As a former reincarnation who has traveled to the heavens and worlds, although KO has been to the Marvel world several times because of missions, he missed the plot of Thor by coincidence, so he is very interested in this Mjolnir. Thinking of this, KO no longer hesitated, and directly stretched out his palm to grab the handle of Mjolnir's hammer. But at this moment, an unexpected scene happened. Accompanied by the slight vibration of the space, the ground under KO's feet suddenly began to rise, and the gaps in those floor tiles turned into a solitary wall, climbing up at different speeds like an elevator room being dragged by a tractor. The sections of the bricks were exposed, and the fine air pockets that appeared in the mixing cement were exposed to KO's eyes, densely packed like ant nests. KO's slender body rose suddenly, suspended in the midair. He looked around. Mjolnir who was standing on the ground had long since disappeared, and the temporary tents around him were split apart, and the whole world was closing together. However, seeing this scene, KO shook his head and smiled lightly, as if he had expected it. The next moment, his figure was like an arrow from the string, crossing the countless layers of mountains in front of him, and straight into the sky. Boom! At the same time, the surrounding space made a tooth-piercing distorted creaking sound again. The mountain-like clods that had climbed to the extreme were suddenly cut off at the waist, and the lower half remained in place, while the upper half seemed to be slowly moving towards the middle. Folding over, pressing over with unquestionable momentum. The space just now was just folding up and down, but at the moment, the whole world is folding toward the center. The sound of space folding and closing resounded endlessly, connecting everything together without a single gap. The tiny KO is like a flatboat in the Sea of Wongyang, which is in danger of capsizing at any time. But in the face of this situation, the young man in the black sweater remained indifferent, but with an inexplicable smile on his face. "You know, I've been waiting for you to come to my door." With his hands folded in front of his chest, feeling the constant spatial vibrations around him, KO chuckled and said to himself, "I thought you would have come earlier. For example, when I first came to this world 8 years ago, or on the streets of Manhattan not long ago, but now." "Well, do you mean that you are afraid that I will offend Asgard and cause Odin to be dissatisfied with the earth?" While speaking, the folded and changing void space opened a circular passage, and a figure in a yellow robe came lightly. "First meeting, unknown outsider, my name is Ancient One." Lifting the hood that concealed his face, a shiny bald head appeared in front of KO. "I don't know when it started, all travelers who come to the Marvel world will basically encounter a character that cannot be avoided. That person is the Supreme Mage sitting in Kamar Taj, Ancient One. As the most powerful person on this planet, Ancient One's strength should not be underestimated. According to Marvel's official setting, this Supreme Mage has lived for at least 500 years, and his strength is extremely strong. In addition, the power of Time Gem has resisted the Dimension Mephisto and alien visitors who want to invade the Earth many times, and has made a great name in the universe. Even other peak existences like Thanos, the level sub-godfather, dare not invade the Earth before she and Odin die, which shows how powerful she is. Definitely, this is just the movie version. If it is the strongest Ancient One mage in the comics, then it is really a mess of strength, at least it is a multi-universe boss. Fortunately, the Ancient One that KO is facing at the moment is obviously far from being that strong. "You shouldn't be here, let alone interfere with the future that should happen," the bald woman with a neutral appearance said with a blank expression, but there was a deep disgust and fear in her eyes. "The future is not static. You should be the most aware of this truth." KO chuckled and shook his head. As a senior former reincarnation, he always scoffed at the theory of fate. "Maybe so, but because of your interference, the future that should have been traced has become confusing, and it is impossible for me to sit idly by and entrust the future of the Earth in the hands of an outsider like you." Having said that, Ancient One frowned again and looked at KO. The uneasiness in his heart became more and more intense. In the past years, it is not that she has not encountered some smugglers from otherworld, but under the function of Time Gem, she can more or less spy on the origins of these people and their influence on the future. But this guy is the only one. The power of Time Gem seems to have completely lost its effect on him, but whatever he meddles in, the future will become a chaos, full of uncertainty. This made Ancient One, who has guarded the earth for hundreds of years, feel deeply disturbed. Rather than this, she would rather keep the future unchanged and continue walking on the original track. At least, that kind of future is not too bad. Get out of the United States and do whatever you want as long as you don't get involved here. Ancient One whispered, as if making huge amounts of concessions. The center of the Marvel Universe is the Earth, and the center of the Marvel Earth is the United States, so as long as she leaves the United States, whatever KO does will not affect the future she has ever seen. Definitely, it would be even better if we could leave the Earth. Oh, then if I refuse, how are you going to deal with me? There was a smile in KO's eyes, but his tone suddenly turned cold. As soon as the words fell, KO was surrounded by countless orange magic circles, and the surrounding space was folded again, as if it had been smashed into countless pieces of broken mirrors. Oh, magic. KO touched the magic matrix close at hand with his fingers, feeling the energy form that is different from the material that can be given and the strange energy that quietly poured into the body. A look of nostalgia appeared on that handsome face. As we all know, Kryptonians have 3 fatal weaknesses. Kryptonite from the home planet Krypton, the spectrum of red fixed star, and the magic that only exists in the illusion of the common people. This is a mysterious energy system with various types. It was once all the rage in the main god space. Although it has the disadvantage of being easy to learn and difficult to master, it is undeniable that this extremely comprehensive strengthening system is too convenient and can be compared with it, there is only the Eastern cultivation system. When KO was still a reincarnation, he had encountered enemies who practiced magic many times. Some of them were strong and some were weak, but without exception they were all extremely troublesome characters and should not be underestimated. For the Kryptonians of common, the threat of these magics is magnified thousands of times, and any magician can make them burnt out. Definitely, there is also a big blue guy here. The reason why he likes to catch magic with his face is in it. I've seen the little books you drew. It's very interesting. They are such a powerful race, but they have no resistance to magic. Ability, definitely, if you're not lying. At the same time, Ancient One's body jumped up abruptly, and on the tips of 10 fingers, bright magic radiance shone, and he rushed towards KO at a speed unlike mage. The next moment, a magic circle that rotated rapidly like an angle ruler was formed between her fingers, and it was directly used as a melee weapon to cut KO's neck. According to the setting in the comics, those without magic resistance will be hit by her like tofu under magic. However, stab, sting. As if a sharp weapon collided with an indestructible rock, countless energy sparks flew from the magic circle. Not bad attack, you successfully made me feel itchy. KO looked at the orange circle that was trying to cut off his neck, the corners of his mouth slightly curved, and then, with Ancient One's slightly astonished expression, he punched her in the face. Seeing the fist hitting her, Ancient One's expression changed slightly, and then countless magic circles sprang up all over her body, protecting her in it. Compared with the powerful opponents he has encountered before, the punch in front of him seems very ordinary, at least relying on his own dynamic capture ability enhanced by the energy of the dark dimension, and the means of mental scanning. Ancient One is in just a few microseconds. More than 30 methods were thought of to disintegrate this punch silently. Then there are more than 60 kinds of methods, and those who can rashly throw this punch will counterattack with absolute fatality. But soon, Ancient One found himself dead wrong. It is obviously such a punch full of loopholes, but it violates all physical and spiritual laws in an extremely weird way, whether it is a mental shock or the effects of the disease, slowness, weakening, and blocking in the surrounding magic circle, all of them are hit by this swing without exception. The punch was easily scattered. In the end, the fist landed on Ancient One's thin body without obstruction. In an instant, all the light and shadow in front of him were scattered at the same time, and as the magic circle cracked and shattered, Ancient One's flesh, brain, and internal organs were all splashed out by this punch. Afterwards, the remaining force of this force enough to penetrate the continent continued to blast into the distance, destroying everything that had been turned into a different space into nothingness. However, at the next moment, this piece of space that was shattered due to the instability of space did not disappear, and everything before it was slowly regressing like a time reversal, until the time when the original Ancient One met him. But what is interesting is that Ko, who should have flowed back to the origin, together, was unmoved, like an outsider, looking at the resurrected Supreme Mage with a sneer, his eyes filled with undisguised contempt and mockery. Time loop. Using your own death as a condition. As long as you kill you, the timeline will return to the scene you set. It's really disgusting. Ancient One, who, just, came out of the yellow circle, heard this sentence, and the pupils under the hood suddenly shrank. She looked at Ko, who was sneering, in astonishment, and asked in disbelief, "You are not affected by the time loop? How is this possible?" "Impossible. Hey, Ancient One, this doesn't sound like something you, the Supreme Mage, would say." Ko chuckled and mocked, but he didn't leak his ability information to the bald nun in front of him like some villains in TV. In fact, the reason why he cannot be afraid of the magic attack of Ancient One and the ability of Time Gem is mainly due to the cultivation system he was best at when he was a reincarnation, Gene Lock. The so-called Gene Lock is actually a practice system that can arouse powerful strength by facing the fear of life, danger and death. It can be said that it has the lowest threshold, the greatest potential, and the highest death rate among the countless strengthening methods in the main God space of a system. The system of the Gene Lock can be roughly divided into 5 stages, and the first 3 stages will not be described here. If you are not clear, please go to Baidu by yourself. As for the 4th level, it is also the most important stage in the entire Gene Lock system. Only when reincarnated people reach this level can they be considered as qualified to change their own destiny, and it is also the criterion for judging whether a person is a strong person. The 4th level of Gene Lock is also known as the subtle stage. Reincarnators only need to set foot in this field, that is, the 4th level primary, and then they can adjust and optimize their genes according to their own needs, so that they can reach the most powerful fighting state. Every ounce of strength is grasped to the point, and every gene is tapped to its potential, so as to fully display the special ability. Ko in this life uses this extremely precise ability to make up for the defects in his Kryptonian cells one by one. Today, he is not only unaffected by kryptonite and red sun, but also has extremely strong resistance to magic. At least the magic below level single universe is hard to cause any fatal damage to him. What's more, Ko at its peak is not just as simple as the beginning of the 4th level. If it is said that the reincarnation at the beginning of the 4th level can only perfectly develop all their own strengths, then at the stronger 4th level, they can rationally reorganize and change genes, and change the fighting form at the current level by choosing different genes. Freely control the genetic variation to simulate the ability form of other races. At the same time, after going through the terrifying catastrophe of inner demons, every 4th level can awaken the personalized light of the soul, has the root of immortality, and reverses the metamorphosis of increasing entropy and seeking from the outside to giving from the inside. In addition to the basic telekinetic ability, the strong awakening soul light naturally masters a special ability, which has the rewriting characteristics of matter, energy, space, time. Not only that, because it is the power corresponding to mimetic distortion, it is somewhat resistant to time and space, causality, even in the face of anti-logic mimetic effects, it is not helpless to fight back. This is why Ko is able to counter the power of the time gem. It's a pity, because Ko wanted to get rid of the main God space completely at the beginning, without leaving any contact, so he deliberately learned some mysterious systems on the eastern side, and cut off part of himself with secret methods so that his spiritual light was seriously affected. Loss, almost no 1 in 100. Even until now, his true strength can only barely reach the level of the beginning of the 4th level, otherwise, let alone a mere time gem, even with 6 gems together, he will. Well, he might not really be able to beat it. Thinking of this, Ko couldn't help but look meaningfully at the opposite side, the metal pendant hanging on the chest of the bald nun. In his vision, a green gem exuding mysterious power is shining brightly in it. It's not impossible to want me to leave the earth, but you also have to pay the due price. A hint of greed gradually emerged in Ko's blue eyes. The other infinite gems are not mentioned for the time being, but if he can get this time gem and use his spiritual light evolution and transcendence to simulate its application to time, this will greatly speed up his recovery to peak state, and even going further is not necessarily hopeless. No, you won't get anything from me. Even if I experience endless death, I will wait until you and your companions leave this world. In that case, stop talking nonsense. After hearing the expected answer, KO didn't bother to waste his time talking. In the next second, accompanied by a violent sonic boom, his whole body spanned a distance of several thousand meters as if teleporting, and with the supreme power to shatter the void, he punched at the position of Ancient One again. Boom! The void roared, and vast magical energy swept out, pressing the red flame to spread and burn, and three gradually solidified figures could be seen coming to the world in the mirror image. Emperor Weixin, the power of the Trinity, comes. The story is divided into two ends. Just as KO and Ancient One are fighting inseparably in the mirror world, the plot of Thor 1 Inch Outside is also proceeding step by step. Under the guidance of fate, Thor, who lost the power of Thor, still met Jane Foster, the female doctor of astronomy in the movie, and after several exchanges, the two developed a considerable affection for each other. And just when the couple were fighting fiercely and were about to wipe out their guns, Thor suddenly learned of Mjolnir's whereabouts from a passerby, and he was overjoyed. He couldn't wait to find out where the hammer fell, set off and rush. So that night, Thor sneaked very hard to the temporary laboratory built by S.H.I.E.L.D., knocked down the burly and strong agents in black, and came to the hammer, trying to pull out the hammer that had accompanied him for thousands of years. However, the nurse who was deprived of Thor's qualifications by Odin couldn't lift Mjolnir at all. No matter how hard he tried to suck, his face was flushed, he couldn't shake it at all. No, father, that's not the case. Thor fell to his knees on the ground with his head up. Abandoned by his family, he felt that the world collapsed in an instant. He looked up at the sky with tears in his tiger eyes, crying like a child weighing hundreds of catties. Not picking up the hammer means that he has lost his qualifications, lost his father's love for him, Thor's glory has been deprived, and he will never be able to return to Asgard to play happily with Loki. Thinking of this, Thor's heart was twisted like a knife, and he knelt down on the ground stupidly, his soul lost its color, and his whole body turned gray. Just at this moment, a lot of dark clouds gathered in the sky, and after the thunder, it began to rain heavily, setting off Thor, who was kneeling on the ground, like a heroine in a miserable movie. But that's all, it's not over yet. In Asgard, evil god Loki, who monitored Oni-chan all the time, found out that Mjolnir had abandoned Thor, and quietly came to Earth, found Thor who was detained by S.H.I.E.L.D., and fooled him Odin already mad at him. Thornton, who was convinced of Odudo, was heartbroken. He really thought that Odin's death had something to do with him. After a lot of grief, he finally realized it, so he drank his sorrows with Dr. Bruce Banner Selvig in the bar. From then on, he seemed to have completely let go of his arrogance, and became mature and stable. He told Jane all kinds of secrets and strange things, and gained a wave of goodwill. Just when he thought that all of this would develop so peacefully, that he would spend his life peacefully on Earth with marriage and children. A beam of light that fell from the sky landed not far from the small town where they were staying. Immediately afterwards, 4 Asgardians in strange costumes stepped out of the beam of light. Their weird outfits attracted the attention of passers-by, wearing medieval-like retro armor, with axes, long swords and shields, as if they just ran out of the set of Lord of the Rings. In fact, these 4 people are Thor's friends, namely Hogun with an oriental face, Valkyrie Sif, Fandral with a very saintly demeanor, and a Viking warrior Vostag with a big beard. They came this time only to find Thor, the son of the God King who was banished to Midgard by the God King, and to help him return to Asgard. After some discussion, the 4 found the surrounding townspeople to inquire around. The strange questioning method made the people here look strange, but they finally got the news of Thor. Thor, who was still enjoying breakfast with Jane Foster, looked back with joy. The 4 of Sif beat the glass excitedly, calling for him. After a short reminiscence, Thor, whose IQ has begun to rise, began to worry about his friends. Friends, thank you for taking such a big risk to see me, but my father died because of me, I should be exiled, this will drag you down. After hearing this sentence, the group of 4 looked stunned. But His Majesty the God King is not dead. At this point, Loki's conspiracy was completely exposed. At the same time, Loki, who was always monitoring his Oni-chan, turned the table over when he saw that the scene could no longer continue. At the same time, 20 minutes ago, in the temporary command post of S.H.I.E.L.D., the data monitoring center received a huge amounts of energy signal. Although it only lasted for an extremely short moment, it was still located at the specific coordinates, 10 miles away from the northwest direction of the town, somewhere in 5 miles. Phil Coulson immediately led a group of agents to the destination, but all they were left with was a complicated and obscure strange symbol, like a special ancient language. "Get a professional linguist," Phil Coulson said to Hillwitter, a bald agent with glasses. According to the first-hand data obtained from Jane, S.H.I.E.L.D. suspects that the root cause of the abnormal phenomenon of the atmosphere is caused by the impact of huge amounts of energy on the space, and some people may be conducting some ulterior secret experiments. However, their suspicions were quickly overturned. The sunny weather last moment was covered by dark clouds at some point, and a huge funnel-shaped vortex stirred the airflow, forming a magnificent column of smoke with huge amounts of smoke. Amidst the billowing dust, the smoke column like a huge tornado dissipated slowly. Phil Coulson, who was hiding behind the car, saw a silver-white titan in metal armor, standing on the ground like a Terminator. A cold light shone all over his body. "Is this a new toy Stark made?" An ominous premonition floated in Phil Coulson's mind. As if sensing something, Silver White's titan ran towards the town with heavy steps. The ground trembled and shook, and the black-clothed agent standing in front of him had no power to resist in front of this non-man-made object. The intensive firepower from the guns could not even reveal a trace of the armor worn by the titan. Facing the interference of these ants, the silver-white titan finally reacted. The metal on the face spread out from both sides like liquid, violent and intense energy gathered, and hot rays gushed out like fire. The roaring sound was endless, and the residents of the town also noticed the abnormal situation. The thunderous sound attracted everyone's attention, and soon people saw this silver-white titan full of metallic texture. Destroyer Thor, who had just joined the three warriors of Asgard and Sif, looked solemn. As the prince of Asgard and the future heir to the king, he recognized this silver-white titan instantly. This is actually a giant armor called the Destroyer. It is a super weapon cast by his father Odin many years ago in order to deal with some powerful beings. It has been blessed and blessed by many gods. With incredible power, originally it is indestructible. I have to recover my divine power, otherwise I won't be able to defeat it at all. After being rejected by Mjolnir, Thor once again tried this powerless frustration. In desperation, he had to let the three warriors of Asgard and Sif delay the destroyer's footsteps, and himself, who became immortal, chose to evacuate the residents of the town to avoid causing more casualties. The three warriors of Asgard and the Valkyrie Sif definitely had the duty to do so. They showed their weapons one after another, and fought against the destroyer armor without fear. The body density of the Asgardians is 3 times that of the Earthlings, and their attributes in all aspects exceed the limits of human beings. Even Loki, who has relatively weak hand-to-hand combat ability although he is not an Asgardian, can suppress the United States in a frontal battle team leader. The three warriors of Asgard all have melee ability not inferior to Loki, and Valkyrie Sif is even more outstanding in fighting ability. It can be said that she is the most capable woman in Asgard. It's a pity that what they are facing now is the destroyer armor personally built by the king of God Odin. Their usual invincible combat skills can't play any role in front of this indestructible giant armor, and they will soon fall to the same level as before. The same fate as the agent, he fled in embarrassment with his head in his arms. The destroyer's mask was opened, and the scorching rays constantly caused damage to the town. The raging flames swept out, sweeping over the vehicles parked on the side of the road and the buildings next to them. In an instant, thick smoke rose and the flames shot into the sky. From a distant time and space, Loki holding Gungnir controls the destroyer remotely with his mind. To be honest, he didn't intend to kill Thor. Even after he knew the truth that he was a descendant of Frost Titan, although there was no close relationship in blood, the brotherhood for many years could not be faked. But what he didn't expect was that those men who had been fighting side by side with Thor would dare to openly disobey his orders, colluded with Heimdall who guarded Bifrost, and came to Midgard privately to take the reckless and arrogant "The Big Brother welcomes you back." Whether in terms of the legitimacy of inheriting the throne or the royal blood flowing in his body, Loki is not as good as Thor. When all the lies are exposed and Odin wakes up from hibernation, he will be completely dusted, and even lose his noble status as Prince of Asgard. Thinking that such a thing is very likely to become a reality, Loki couldn't help feeling cold all over his body, so he could only make up his mind and send the destroyer armor in Odin's treasure house to kill Thor, who stayed on the earth. "I'm sorry, my dear big brother." Loki was wearing an antler helmet and holding the eternal spear, sitting high on the throne, with a trace of sadness and ice-like indifference in his eyes. The 4 Asgardian warriors were blown out one after another by the destroyer. In the hollow visor, powerful destructive energy gathered, the flames shot out, huge amounts of explosions roared, the energy surged, and the scorching air billowed endlessly. The powerful female warrior escaped the attack of the destroyer, held the long sword in her hand, leapt high, and with the help of a powerful impact, stabbed fiercely into the armor vest. But the manipulator of this god's armor is not inside. This blow has no effect at all. The next moment, the huge body turned back and forth like liquid metal, and the scorching and violent energy flames gathered from the visor, and the target was Sif, who was stunned by this change. "Stop, Loki." The roar stopped the destroyer from moving. It turned its head and looked at the source of the sound. In the smoke and dust, Thor held his head high and strode forward, walking towards the destroyer. "Loki, my brother, whatever I did to lead you astray, whatever I did to make you do this, I am so sorry. But these people are innocent, kill them, you can't get anything." Thor, who knew his way back, was full of guilt on his face, and he expressed his apology with emotion. His voice is so contagious and his expression is so genuine. "Take my life, and then, let this end." Loki, who watched everything through the destroyer, was deeply moved. The 3 warriors of Sif and Asgard were deeply moved by Thor's spirit of sacrifice. The energy fluctuations on the destroyer's head slowly disappeared, the laser light dimmed, the mask slowly closed, and he turned to leave. A gratified smile appeared on Thor's face, and he felt that he had really convinced his brother. Then the destroyer suddenly swung his hand backwards, and knocked Thor flying. A body weighing several hundred kilograms, Asgard people have a high body density, suddenly became fragmented under the impact of huge amounts of impact. When it landed, it had suffered countless fractures, and even its neck began to bend abnormally. No, seeing this scene, everyone at the scene burst into heart-piercing cries. Among them, Sif and Jane Foster shouted the loudest. "No, no, 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 it's impossible. It's not true." At this moment, Jane Foster was simply possessed by Bolt's soul, and ran out faster than Sif to hug the dying Thor. "It's over." Thor buried his head in her arms, seemed a little regretful, and said with a little relief. Then, he closed his eyes. At the same time, 50 miles away, Mjolnir, which had been standing still, began to rise slowly from the ground, and arcs of Zon blue danced on its surface. Then, with a shocking whistling sound, he rushed out of the laboratory tent and flew straight to Thor's corpse, that was about to cool down. In the next moment, at a place less than 10 meters away from Mjolnir, the invisible space suddenly collapsed. Immediately afterwards, a white palm protruded from it, holding the Asgard artifact and legendary. Asgard, Asgard, in the chamber of the God King. Odin, who had been sleeping all this time, suddenly opened his eyes. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.